Welcome back to the FTN NFL Draft Preview Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle. You can follow me on Twitter at RandleRand, and we continue to go to the sources, go to the people in the know who have the information that can help us get ready for the NFL Draft. Yes, the Super Bowl is around the corner, but we're going to be talking NFL Draft in no time, and one of my great people that I had the honor to interview last year is back with us today, Gilbert Manzano, who covers the Rams for the Orange County Register. Follow him on Twitter at gmanzano24. Gilbert, it is great to have you back. How you doing?
Mike, good to see you again. It wasn't the season that the Rams wanted. It was my first season covering the Rams. It was eventful overall, but it was a rough one for the defending. I guess not anymore. Former defending Super Bowl champions.
Well, it was, but they've had a lot of success. And Gilbert, you know what they did? They went all in and they got rewarded for it. So now Les Snead and everyone have to figure out how to manipulate to get it back. And I want to start, obviously, with the head coach, Sean McVay. I'm out on the East Coast. We heard rumors a little while ago. He's considering stepping away, maybe going to TV. Just give us a summary of how that went down. And it looks like he's returning and going to make another run at another title here with the Rams.
Yeah, even during a 5-12, losing season, which is supposed to be forgettable. Like you just move on, but they still make noise. The Rams always find a way to, get in the news. And yeah, Sean McVay was thinking about leaving. And I was very surprised how open he was about it, to the media. He's like, yeah, I've always had these dreams of going to TV and being an analyst. I'm not going to run away from that. I'm going to listen to people and I'm going to take 2 weeks off. And the funny thing about it, too, he's like, hey, while I'm trying to figure out, my future, my coaching staff, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. You want to leave, go ahead and leave. And then he comes back and he says, yeah, you know what? Forget that. I'm coming back. And he pretty much fired like half the staff. So Sean McVay could be ruthless at times. He mentioned at one time during the season, and it really, I don't think he thought he was going to catch a, kind of, big media attention when he said, this is a professional failure for me. And that tells you how high the bar is for Sean McVay, where he was just frustrated about, a 6-game losing streak in the middle of the season. Maybe it was burned out at one point. I even asked him, hey, Sean, was there a point in this terrible season where you thought, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be a coach anymore. And he said, you know what? It just got my competitive fire going. I learned a lot. And that's when you start thinking, okay, this guy doesn't want to leave. You can't walk away. If you're the best head coach and you're so competitive, you can't walk away after your first losing season. So I think it came down to that. And then talking to guys like Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, these guys who are in their prime, who are like, hey, I need you right now. We're not getting any younger. Aaron Donald, Bobby Wagner, maybe Jalen Ramsey. We'll see. So many veterans on these teams are ready to win now. The tricky part is like this. We're going to get into it, but there's so many holes in the roster. But I think Sean McVay is up for the challenge. And I think that's why he's coming back for a 7th season to be the head coach of the Rams.
Yeah, and the first change that we'll talk about here is the offensive coordinator. Sort of shocked here, Gilbert, that former offensive coordinator Liam Cohen officially announced that he was going over to Kentucky. And then, of course, now they've recently made the change, just hired a couple days ago, Mike LaFleur coming over to be the new offensive coordinator from the Jets. So talk about Cohen leaving there. Sort of odd that he goes to Kentucky there for the same position and now bring in LaFleur, of course. How do you think that's going to go here with the Rams next year?
Yeah, when there was like reports coming out that Liam was going back to Kentucky, you start thinking this is weird. Like,
Yes.
like no knock on college programs, but if you're trying to become a head coach in the NFL, and that's what Liam has told us, you stay there and you become the OC and you work your way up, but not go kind of backwards. So you start thinking 2 things. One, does Liam know something we don't? Does Liam think that Sean McVay is gone and his job won't be secure for the next coaching staff? So I might as well go find something and leave. Or 2, which is I'm leaning more to this one now, it just didn't work out with Sean McVay. And like I mentioned, Sean McVay is a ruthless competitor. If the results aren't coming, if you're not clicking, he's going to give you your walking papers. And it could have been that. Maybe it's kind of like, hey, let's mutually – you always hear that phrase in football, parted ways mutually. And it's never the case. But it could have been a rift there. But the weird thing with Liam Cohen, he's not the one calling the plays. That's Sean McVay. You got to point the finger at yourself sometimes. And he does a lot to Sean McVay's credit. But – maybe there's something that wasn't working out there, and it's tough because usually all these guys who work with Sean McVay always works out. They always like this coaching tree for Sean McVay is tremendous. It's thriving. But like Liam Cohen, it didn't work out. So and the other tricky part about it, when he went to get Mike LaFleur, who it seemed like he was the only candidate, it was his job to lose. When you have talented guys like Zach Robinson, your quarterback's coach, being interviewed by the Chargers for the OC job and the Baltimore Ravens, and you also have Thomas Brown on your staff, the assistant head coach, former tight ends coach and running backs coach, who really helped that that program, sorry, not program, but club, if you want to say, for many years, and these guys didn't get promoted internally. I guess maybe Sean McVay just really wanted to try something new. Hey, Mike LaFleur, you're my guy. Let's see what happens. But it is kind of an interesting note that he did not go Zach Robinson or Thomas Brown.
Yes, definitely. And the question is, what are the weapons that LaFleur is going to have? Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, obviously fantastic all-pro players. Talk about them, their health coming back, how things look for 2023.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens because, last year many people had high hopes, and I'm going to blame myself. I was really hyping up the Allen Robinson train there, and he looked great in training camp. And Matthew Stafford didn't participate in OTAs, but that 1 week or two where Stafford was able to participate in camp, they had a connection. He had this massive catch rate, just throw anything you want, and he was doing it. And it just didn't work out with Allen Robinson for whatever reason. And then his season got cut short. I forget the injuries because there were so many, Mike. But there was, I think it was an ankle injury for Allen Robinson, and he missed probably like the final 8 or 9 games. So he never got going because by the time maybe he was feeling the system and getting in a groove, Matthew Stafford was out. So nobody really got together. So, and also too, they have, some cap issues. They want to get some draft picks. They want to get younger. So I don't know about Allen Robinson's future. For sure, it starts with Cooper Kupp, and that's going to be your number 1 wide receiver, one of the best in the world. And his season also got cut really short. I think he played about 9 games, but he still had massive numbers. He's going to probably match what he did in 2021. But so Cooper Kupp will be back. He has a big contract. But what happens after? I was impressed with Van Jefferson. I want to say that was his 3rd year last year. And it took him a while to get going because he also had surgery during training camp. So a lot of these guys have injuries, and it takes a while to get going. I think it was a knee issue, and he had 2 knee surgeries in a span of 6 months. But when Van finally got going, he was the one that was clicking with Baker Mayfield. We can't forget about Baker Mayfield. I don't think he'll be back, but Van Jefferson really thrived. But when you think about it, is it just Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson? What about Tutu Atwell? I saw some flashes, but not enough. So suddenly this wide receiver group is a little thin. Maybe you don't have enough burners. Maybe you don't have enough, big guys. You have the route runner, an amazing guy in Cooper Kupp. But Tyler Higbee was solid, but he's just solid. Maybe you want to get upgraded and get better there. But I know Sean McVay loves Tyler Higbee. And I forget, maybe you asked me about running backs, but if it's just pass catchers, I think that's it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Cooper Kupp, just in the fantasy community, Gilbert, there was questions whether he could recreate what he did 2 years ago. He was off to a dominant start. It's almost like the answer is always Cooper Kupp, whether you like it or not, here with the Rams. But then we were surprised also that Higbee did not take the step forward. Even with Allen Robinson struggling and then Cooper Kupp goes out, you would think Higbee would see a big increase, but that never really materialized.
Yeah, for so many targets that he got, and like Mike, the tight end position is hard to find somebody. You're over streaming unless you have the star players. There's always 2 or 3 guys that just do well, and the rest is like, okay, what do you do here? And if you want a solid 5 to 10 points and you're consistent, Tyler Higbee was your guy, but he didn't get his first touchdown into the Green Bay game Monday Night Football, which was Week 15 in December with Baker Mayfield. He kind of had a nice little December. He had a couple more touchdowns after that. But you don't want to go for singles every time with your tight end, and I know you want to get greedy sometime. But he just does a lot for his 11 personnel that Sean McVay really loves. He doesn't want to play 2 tight ends, so you better be a tight end that does a lot. So also too, he was being asked to block a lot because his offensive line was pretty bad a year ago, and it's going to be more moving parts, I feel like. But I don't know about the position. Maybe you could do a little more. I think towards the end of the year, Sean McVay started playing more 2 tight end sets with Bryson Hopkins, who we all thought was going to have a nice year because he did well in the playoff run and stepped up in the Super Bowl. And he's a great receiver. Maybe he needs to kind of polish up the blocking and the other things that you need to do in the Sean McVay as a tight end because there's so many roles. But I think when you have so many blocking issues, maybe you play more at 12%, but for some reason they wouldn't do it. But I don't know. I think we know who Higbee is. And the funny thing, he set the records in the franchise for receiving touchdowns, receiving yards, like catches. So he's steady. It just doesn't really pop,
Yeah, and my last question before we get to free agents and some draft speculation. We heard, Gilbert, about this elbow issue with Matthew Stafford to start the year. And when I heard McVay was thinking about possibly stepping away, I started to wonder myself, is the Matthew Stafford elbow thing sort of a bigger deal than they're letting on? So what are you hearing here with Stafford, with health, most importantly, coming back next year?
They want to have him be rested for a full offseason. And that's all they kept saying, when we were asking, because you have a concussion, you have the spinal cord contusion. These are all serious injuries, and he's a veteran who already won the Super Bowl. You start thinking, okay, maybe he wants to retire. You know, he has some, a great family, beautiful daughters that he wants to be with. And I know his wife, Kelly Stafford, has been open about, okay, we're not gonna mess around with concussions. So you start thinking maybe this guy, that's it. But Sean McVay, he kept telling us, no, he's healthy, he's ready to go. And one positive is going to be he's going to have a healthy offseason. And then Stafford came and talked to the reporter, said, no, I'm not retiring. I don't even know where you got that from. So he's going to be QB1 for the Rams in 2023. But how is he going to look on the field? Because when you had the surgery with the elbow procedure, the concussion, the spinal contusion, I'm losing my words there. And also he's a year older, and maybe it could be more moving parts. I don't know about Stafford. It's gonna be so much unknown. But it's funny how a year ago they kept saying, "Don't worry about the elbow procedure. He's gonna be fine. Who cares if he misses training camp, OTAs, whatever." And then suddenly in December, like, yeah, that really mattered. You needed to have Stafford out there to get chemistry, Robinson. So they're saying good things right now that he's gonna be healthy for the offseason. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. All these guys that got banged up are healthy. Aaron Donald, and they're trying to do it again.
All right, and then new players that are leaving. You mentioned Jalen Ramsey a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, Rams have given a lot of their draft picks. They pushed all in to get the Super Bowl title, so no first-round pick this year. But they do have the 36th pick overall because the Dolphins had to forfeit their picks. There's only 31 picks in the first round of the draft. So talk about maybe who they could be targeting early and about players coming back. There's some uncertainty there. Who do you think is going to be back? Who may not be back this year for the Rams?
Yeah, when we spoke to the GM Les Need, it was a very open conversation, and maybe one that we had to look in the mirror a little bit and say, hey, we're not the same team that was a Super Bowl contender every year where you just go all in. You get a veteran, go get OBJ, go get Von Miller, Stafford, Ramsey. We're one player away, and maybe a few mid to late round draft picks that could contribute right away to be a Super Bowl contender. That's not anymore. It's not that easy, and I think they know that. And when I mentioned, they have cap issues and need higher draft picks, that like Leslie kept saying, like, yeah, we need to get younger. We need to keep some of these top draft picks. And that tells you there's a philosophy shift there. And he called it phase 3 of the McVay era. And he kept saying it's going to look similar to phase 1 of the McVay era, which was when he came in as this young, offensive genius who took over what Jeff Fisher messed up and instantly made them a playoff team. They were a playoff team, but they weren't a Super Bowl contender. They weren't a legit threat into phase 2 when that was a all gas, no break. So I think they're going to try to, I think Les Snead called it retool instead of rebuild. So they want to be competitive. And you have to be in LA when you're trying to sell tickets. When people in LA stop caring if you don't win. So they're going to be competitive. But if you want to get younger at the same time, who's going to go? And everybody keeps pointing the finger at Jalen Ramsey because he hasn't got an extension. He has one more year on the contract. He had a rocky start to the year, but he finished really strong, I thought. And if you check some of his numbers, especially for PFF, they love what Jalen Ramsey did all year. So he might have some value. And the thing with Ramsey, though, if he wants a new contract, that might say teams, hey, I'm not giving a first-round pick for a guy who wants a new contract. So it could be a second or third-round pick, but that's still good value for the Rams who need all the draft picks they can get. But if they give up Ramsey, they're really hurting in the secondary. We'll get into the free agents because some of these safeties, are probably coming back. Their cornerbacks are really young, but you got to pick a position. It won't be Aaron Donald. It won't be Cooper Kupp. It won't be Stafford. Those are some massive contracts. You probably can't even move if you wanted to. Bobby Wagner just play lights out. And I think that people love him, but he's also older. I don't know how much he'll get in terms of draft pick. So we're all looking at Jalen Ramsey. And Jalen Ramsey, just to kind of throw a team out there, he kept telling me, I want to play with Derwin James in the future. Maybe the future comes soon. And maybe this is the Chargers. We'll see because the Chargers have their own cap issues. But I keep going back to Jalen Ramsey as being that player.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at the draft picks here, they have a round 2 pick, a round 3 pick, and then 2 6s and a 7. So my guess would be, Gilbert, from what you're saying, that they're going to look for possibly secondary if they move on from Ramsey, and then maybe offensive line to bolster the line a little bit. That would be my guess.
If they do move on from Ramsey, yeah, you start looking at cornerback. But I keep going back to edge rusher, and if you're trying to get more cap space, and if you're just trying to cut a dude, maybe they can flip him for a pick. But Leonard Floyd also could be another option there. But then if you get rid of Leonard Floyd, what do you have at edge rusher? And this is one of the most prominent positions in the NFL. You got to rush the passer, and they couldn't do that for the first 8 weeks of the season, and that was so frustrating for Raheem Morris and Sean McVay. And the two guys they had to replace Von Miller, which Justin Hollins and Terrell Lewis, there was the two guys, and they kept telling us, you got two guys, they're going to be close to kind of replace Von Miller, but you can't fully complete it. These guys were waived by week 10 or 11 or whatever. So that told you everything right there. So I think to me, the priority is edge rusher. the Rams' philosophy with offensive linemen, that's my second position, is offensive line, because that was just bad play, and Matthew Stafford took a beating. But the Rams have this philosophy where they like to not spend too much money, and they just kind of find these hidden gems in free agency, and they try to make it work. So they might keep doing that. And also they drafted a couple guys last year who got hurt. They really like their interior young guys from last year who got hurt. So I think they're going to just kind of say, hey, let's try to develop these guys. So I keep going back to edge rusher. And they push hard for Brian Burns from the Panthers. And they were willing to give up their whatever 2025 first round pick just to kind of put in the future on hold because they wanted Brian Burns so bad. So I keep going to edge rusher. And then you could always, I think you could find more corners in free agency than edge rushers, or at least ones that are not as expensive. So I always go back to that too.
This is great stuff, Gilbert. Can't thank you enough. This whets our appetite for the NFL draft, Super Bowl coming up. And listen, the Rams have incredible talent, a great coach, and like you said, that competitive streak, they want to get back there again. We will be fascinated by the moves that they're going to make and keep track of it. I would love to get in touch with you right before the draft here in a few months. But folks, Gilbert Manzano at gmanzano24 on Twitter. Have to follow him. Fantastic guy, great insight, super nice as well to give us a few minutes here covering the Rams for the Orange County Register. Thank you so much, Gilbert. We appreciate a few minutes. We'd love to check back in with you as we get closer to the draft.
Of course, Mike. Thank you for the time, and I'll see you again during the draft.